Hey, everyone, and welcome. And I'm Corey Falter, president of the San Diego chapter of HSMAI and partner at Lure Agency. Hold on to your hats, y'all, because you're in for a real humdinger of a today, because we have got one of the top voices on LinkedIn, blowing up everybody's feeds, and he's here to explain the why, the what, and the how. Building your personal brand is your most powerful professional tactic. We've got Nat Berman here. He is the brand built co-founder and entrepreneurial badass here to fire y'all up. And we have our director of large, Kimberly Hensley. She's going to moderate and answer any questions that we'll do a Q&A after it. So let's get this party started. So take it away, Kimberly.
All right. I'll hand it quickly over to Nat, but if you guys have any questions for Nat, just go ahead and throw them in the chat and we'll answer them at Q&A at the end. If you don't mind just going on mute while Nat speaks so we can all hear him, we'll just turn it over to Nat. So thank you so much, Nat, for joining today.
It is my pleasure, Kimberly. Nice to meet you, everybody. So I'm just going to get right into it, okay? If there's one message that I want everybody to really take hold of today and carry with you, it's this one: the person over the product. All right, I'm going to say it again: the person over the product. Now, I don't want to scare everybody and say the old ways of doing business are out, but the old ways of doing business are not as effective as they used to be. All right. And I've been told in the hospitality industry, this is particularly true. So I just want to give you a background of what's going on and some use cases that you can take with you to understand like the impact of what personal branding is having out there. And I'll give you a few right now. So everybody hear of Mr. Beast? You guys know who Mr. Beast is? Okay. Why the hell is that guy's chocolate company competing with Hershey? It's insane. It seems completely out of whack. Why is Jake Paul's Prime competing with Gatorade? Because things are changing, because personal brands matter. If you are getting 100 million followers, something is going to give and people are going to pay attention. Whether it's good or not, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that these people are drawing lots of folks' attention. And so it's not just happening in industries like food or drinks or anything like that. Okay. We're also talking about major high-level positions. All right. I'm going to have to turn on some mutes a second here. Okay. Here we go. Sorry about that. So there's another two names that you guys might be familiar with. Okay. Ray Dalio is one. A very hush industry, lots of secrets, lots of high returns, private equity, investment banking, all of that. You wouldn't think that these guys are going to be too public. Yes, they're very visible in their own fields and in their own circles. But look at Ray Dalio right now. Millions and millions of followers on social media, and he's become mainstream. I happen to know the social media company that grew his profile. Okay. What about Richard Branson? He was one of the original OGs on LinkedIn who had like 1 million followers. All right. He was really one of the first whose name effectively became bigger than the company. It's like when you think of Tesla, you don't think of Tesla, you think of Elon Musk. It's like when you think of Amazon, you don't think of Amazon, you think of Jeff Bezos. So that's where I was talking about person over the product. Don't get me wrong, you've got to have a great product, but it's not going to sell itself anymore these days. How does that relate to the hospitality industry? I've talked at length with Corey and Kimberly about this kind of stuff. And selling is hard. There's no sugarcoating that. Selling is really tough these days. And so in the hotel industry, let's say from the hotel side, and this is verbatim, if 12 different RFPs are being sent out for the same meeting, how the hell are you going to land that business? On the tech side of the business, if 12 different companies are vying for the same business, how are you going to get that business? Because you're all selling the same shit. You are. In financial services, you're all selling what? Returns. The same financial products, 401k, retirement. So why does someone go to one company and not the other? 9 times out of 10, it's somebody they met. It's somebody they trusted. It's somebody that they connected with and resonated with. And that is what is going to help everyone in this room get business, land those deals. And how do you do that? You're going to do that through a personal brand. But before I get into the personal brand, I want to talk about something else. The traditional ways of doing business, like I said before, it's not like they're wrong. It's not like they're bad. Showing up at someone's office unannounced, okay, that's fine. Dropping off a business card, that's cool. Doing something personalized and sending cookies or whatever the hell you guys do, I don't know, that's fine too. But here's the problem with that. It doesn't stick. And I know that in the hospitality industry, one of the things that happens to do really well, speeches, right? We've all heard speeches. Everyone in here wants to get in front of a room of 100 people and pitch their product or service or talk about industry news or educate people in hopes that will eventually turn into business. But 9 times out of 10, again, here's what happens. You either hand out the business card, which is somewhat antiquated these days. You might want to use a QR code for LinkedIn, right? But the talk might be memorable. Hell, this talk might be memorable, right? My goal is that you don't forget who I am after this call. And let me tell you something. You will forget who I am after this call unless you take some sort of action. What action do I want you guys to take? Follow me on LinkedIn. See my stuff. I post every single day. And what happens after that? All of a sudden, that person gets burned into that other person's brain. And then guess what happens? When you've got 12 RFPs out, who's standing out? It's the person whose profile you are now following. So that's some of the evidence, some of the stuff that's important. But when it comes to LinkedIn itself, the reason I'm bringing up LinkedIn and not necessarily TikTok or YouTube or Twitter, I'm not saying those aren't viable mediums because they are. Instagram, when you're talking hospitality industry, it's a very visual medium. So I definitely encourage people to have amazing accounts on, let's say, TikTok for the travel industry. You guys know who Nikki Travel is? I don't know if you know who that is, but good God, she's got a couple million followers, just does reviews of hotels and things like that. But again, that's more on the company side where they can do multimedia, have things of very high quality, and just post eye-popping stuff about their properties and their experiences. But if you're looking to actually build relationships with others in the industry, it's not going to be done by being like, here's my hotel. It's going to be done by building a connection. Here's why LinkedIn is a really good place and very fertile right now for your industry. If you do a search on LinkedIn right now and type in hospitality, you know how many results are going to show up? 7 million. 7 million results are going to show up for hospitality. That sounds really cool, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That doesn't mean all 7 million people are like crazy active and they're constantly posting content all the time. But it's a sure bet there's going to be people in your industry on there. So I actually dialed it down to people who are actually posting on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. And you're still at 220,000. That's a lot of people. Okay. That's a lot of relationships. So you have a very active pool. And instead of having a cold call, instead of having to send cold emails, do all the same crap that you've been doing all these years. And I'm not saying to stop it, but instead of doing that, there's a way to make all of those things a lot warmer. And that's by connecting with those people in your industry in a very different way. Okay. And how do you do that? You do that through storytelling and you do it through educating. And as Corey knows, you do it through really cool t-shirts like the ones I wear every day. But here's something also interesting that I really want to address. And it goes out to not just your industry, but every industry that says this. This is the way we've always done things. This is how we've always done things, right? Now, you're going to get pushback, okay, from either your superiors or the executives who say, this is how things have always been done. But the cool thing is the foundations are cracking. Otherwise, there wouldn't be all of you on this call. And that's why there wouldn't be so many people on LinkedIn or social media starting to push really mainstream businesses in a very much more personal, intimate, and connected way. And that's what I'm encouraging everyone here to do. The thing is, a lot of companies right now, sometimes they get a little bit scared of being upstaged. by someone in the organization and they think to themselves, oh, this person's going to leave because they have this big platform now. Now, in my opinion, it's actually the opposite. If you have employees that are kicking ass and you trust them, they're going to be much more loyal because they can express themselves. And let's say they do leave. Guess what? You haven't burned a bridge. You've encouraged someone to be themselves, and you might have a long-term relationship. And that's what this really is, folks. It's long-term. So years down the road, if you stay in touch with this person, who knows what kind of business you'll be doing with them. And that's something that's pretty cool. And I think that as we continue to go in the next, 2 to 4 years, you're really going to see those foundations continue to crack. And you're going to see a lot more people being personal out there and building those relationships. So how the hell are you going to do that? That's what this webinar is about. And I'm going to get into it right now. Okay. How do you build a good profile on social media? And today, obviously, we're going to focus on LinkedIn. You're going to do that in 3 different ways. And I'm going to explain all 3. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about all of them. And after that, we're going to open it up to Q&A. Okay. So PS on the Q&A side, does anyone have any questions so far? Because I'm happy to answer. Maybe? No? If so, just put them in the chat. Kimberly will moderate. She can stop me and I'll answer any questions. But let's get into it. Okay. There's 3 things that we're going to talk about. Your profile, how to optimize your profile on LinkedIn. The second thing is going to be your content, right? And the last thing is going to be engagement. Without engagement, you're screwed. You could have the best profile in the world. You could have the best content in the world. If you are not engaging, what's the point? No one's going to see your stuff. All right. So let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go over my stuff. I'm going to show you my profile, which is fine. It's not great. Whatever. It's fine. Can everybody see this okay? All right. Am I a model profile? No, but it's pretty good. Okay. Here it is. A whopping 84,000 followers. It doesn't mean shit, folks, unless you're converting. Okay. So I've been on the platform since 2019 creating content. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. I get a ton of engagement on my posts, but if it's not converting, it's meaningless. All right. So let's get into the profile. The main elements of a LinkedIn profile are as follows. There's really 5 of them. Okay. You've got your banner. You've got your tagline. You've got your CTA, which is call to action. Okay. You've got your about section and you've got your featured section. Some people have a services section. I opt for the featured section. They're similar. All right. So let's go into each. All right. Your banner. What is your banner supposed to do? There are lots of people who have banners of an ocean. That's fine. It's nice to have an ocean, but I don't know what you do. Okay. So the first thing you want to have down on your LinkedIn profile is a solid banner. What that banner needs to do is a couple of things. It needs to draw people in, first of all, because a banner actually gets seen 7 to 8 seconds on average. That's an eternity on the internet. Okay. So the banner is much more important than you think it is. So you got to draw them in. How do you do that? Usually visually, aesthetically. I would actually go with a designer. Most people use Canva, but seriously, it's worth ponying up $150. Hint, hint, that's what we charge. But a lot of people charge $400 or $500 for a banner, which is still worth it. It's for a lifetime, potentially. But what you really want on your banner is who do you help? How do you help them? What are their outcomes, right? So it's pretty obvious what I do. Right up here, the right attention is what you need. What am I helping people do? Build attention, right? Get your brand built. Lead the conversation. So basically, I'm trying to display that obviously I specialize in helping people build their brands, but I want people to be thought leaders. And what does that result in? Outcome, right? Growing your business. And then I have a little bit of a call to action, DM brand built for more, right? So that's a way for them to know. You can always send me a message that says brand built. But you don't stop there. You want to really hit it home, and you don't want to give the user any opportunity to do anything other than go where you want them to go. So the second thing that you want is a really good tagline. Now, there's 2 ways you can approach a tagline. In my opinion, you could either have something that's like a slogan, which is what mine is. Don't just build your brand, build your business, right? Mine used to be the business coach who actually runs a business. That was a memorable one. People have asked me to keep that one up, but whatever. And then the other kind of tagline you could have is something that's a little bit more structural, procedural, similar to what's up here. So instead of get your brand built, lead the conversation, grow your business, something along the lines of helping founders build their brands to become thought leaders so that they can build their business. That's more of a sentence. So you're really clarifying what you do, how you help them, who you help within basically one line. A mistake a lot of people do in their taglines, that'll be like CEO of X. Yeah, that's cool, but we don't necessarily need to know that because we can probably scroll down here and figure out that you're a CEO of something, right? Or they'll say, but if you want to drop something personal in there, people do that a lot too, where it's father of two, sports enthusiast, something like that. You can do that, but I would have it way later. You really want the first thing to be very impactful in terms of what you do, how you help people. Then you've got a CTA. A CTA is a call to action. Now, a lot of people use the custom button option, right? So they might have something that says view my website or view my newsletter. The reason I don't opt for that is because it looks very blended in and people don't click it as much. I'm not saying it's like a bad thing, but you always have the option here to have something a little bit more visual. You can choose what your CTA is. Mine is book a one-to-one call with me. And what you put in this CTA is also important. So all of you on here right now have a specific goal when you're creating relationships. Some of you, it might be to book a call. Some of you, it might be to subscribe to a website. Some of you, it might be go to my website. Whatever your goal is, your primary goal, that's what you want to go in here. So for me, if you click on this link here, that'll take you right to my Calendly. And this would be for another conversation, but my Calendly is guarded like Fort Knox. Like you can't book a call with me unless, if you check this out, that's like a whole nother training. But if you go in here and you actually try to book a call with me, it's a royal pain in the ass. Just know that this is the platform. This is what it costs. I even say, if you answered yes, immediately book a call. If you answered yes, but not this time, don't book a call. Or if you said no, book it for another time. Yeah, am I going to get less appointments? Of course, but boy, are those going to be good appointments, right? So that's just a quick little tutorial on gatekeeping there. But anyway, so you've got your link here.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Oh, all right. That's great. Okay. Then when you scroll down, you've got an about section, right? An about section is important. And what a lot of people get wrong is the following. Most about sections that I see look very much like cut and pasted bios from a website. And that's okay because you're used to that. But what you really want in about section is people to get to know you, right? So you want to share your story. That's important. I'm not saying you shouldn't share what you do, but what is going to be memorable? When I think of an about section, I think of the ultimate LinkedIn post. If someone could only read one post about you, what would it be? That's what you want to have as your about section. So mine, what resonates with people is I never wanted a boss, ever. That's probably going to get someone to be a little bit more interested and they're going to want to keep scrolling. So here you go. I explained I had a problem with authority and that eventually led me to doing what? X, Y, and Z. And I now do this. And that's when you get into what you do. And you also want to talk about how people can reach you. Unfortunately, you can't hyperlink anything here, which is very annoying, but you can still put links. And if somebody's interested in enough, they'll cut and paste and they'll put the link somewhere else.
Now, sorry to interrupt. There's one in the chat box if you don't mind answering. Please, what do you think of the SSI index that LinkedIn scores your profile? An SSI index that LinkedIn scores your profile. Do you?
Who does that?
LinkedIn does. It's called a social selling index, and they rank your LinkedIn side of it against other people of similar industry and gives you a score of your percentage if you're in the top percentile. So to your point, you were talking about daily engagement and post, and you went from 700,000 hospitality people down to 200,000. So the other 500,000 is probably has a really low score because they're not engaged.
So a lot of scoring on profiles comes down to you filling out enough stuff. So it'll say you're 5-star or whatever. It's not necessarily a good gauge or measure of your effectiveness of the profile. It's more, hey, you filled out everything you were supposed to. And to your point, most people don't fill out everything they're supposed to. But what we're talking about here is basically LinkedIn, your profile page is your landing page. Everyone knows what a landing page, right? It's a landing page for a website. But here's the kicker. It likely gets a hell of a lot more traffic than your standard landing page, unless you work for a very large organization and their homepage is huge, which does happen. But if you're an individual selling products or services and you have a website, the majority of the time, and I'm talking the majority of the time, your LinkedIn profile is likely going to get considerably more views. I won't even get into the SEO industry and how different it is. Like I said, still do 25 different websites that got annihilated by SEO over the last couple of years. So that's a tough industry to get into. Hey, I want to be seen by Google. Like, really? What about with OpenAI now and everything else? That's a whole different can of worms. So anyway, good question. SSI index, I wouldn't really pay too much attention to it. And then finally, your featured section. What I always say about your featured section, it's your second chance to capture the viewer. And what I mean by that is whatever you have in your initial CTA, which is above the fold, that's probably going to be the most likely thing they're going to click. But if they scroll down, give them another chance. Only this time, you get to use a visual and you get to have a little bit more of a descriptive text on the link here. And just as a little side note, piece of extra information, on these things, what you never want to do, I'm going to show you. See that description? It's blank. Always leave it blank. And I'll tell you why. If you leave it blank, it will be very seamless. You just click on this, right? And it goes right to the website. Whereas if you didn't leave it blank and you put in a description, you know what would happen? You'd see a pop-up window. So remember, the internet is very fast. And so you really want to try and make sure that they're going where you want them to go. You only get one shot at it, right? Who is this? Can we schedule a call this Friday? Not yet. Okay. And then below that, not as important, but you've got your experience here. You just want to make sure you fill that in pretty well. And here's mine, blah, blah, blah. Stuff's not that important. Recommendations are great. A big mistake that I see people do in the featured section, they link to their posts. Don't ever do that. And I'll tell you why. It's redundant. Okay. If you're linking to something that you posted on the platform, it's already there. Someone likely already saw it. Now, I understand that you might want to feature it, but again, you have to look at what your goals are. If your goal is to never have somebody set an appointment with you, go to your website or anything like that, then it's okay. If you just say, hey, I'm just creating awareness and I want to put my top content here, that's fine. But I've never met someone who had that, ever. I've never met someone on LinkedIn who's like, I just want them to look at my good stuff. You want to put up good stuff, put it up every day. So that's the LinkedIn profile. That is ideally how you would optimize it. So before I go on, I'm going to look for a volunteer here and I'm going to do a quick profile teardown. So whoever wants to raise their hand, click on where it says more, or no, where does it say reactions? Where does it say reactions? It should be somewhere on your thing where it says reactions. If anybody wants to do a content teardown, I'm willing to do it right now. I'll whip it out in 5 minutes. Mercedes, Julie. I saw Mercedes first. Julie, I know we've already talked on LinkedIn, so you're good. I'll get you a different time. All right, Mercedes. I want to pronounce it correctly. Montijo?
Yeah, rip it.
Nat, before you do that, would you mind stop sharing and resharing? I'm getting a couple messages that they can't see your screen. So I just want to make sure everybody can see.
What do you mean stop sharing and resharing?
A couple people on the call cannot see your screen. I can see it. I don't know if anybody else is having that issue, but
I'm not hitting anything other than just right now my screen is being shared.
share.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That sucks.
Kelsey, you see it? Okay.
You'll be able to see it in the video.
You may
Like
want to
it's
jump in and jump out of the Zoom call.
I'll tell you what, I would recommend that. I'm going to stop my share right now and then I'll do it again. All right.
Perfect.
So everybody,
Thank
I
you.
just stopped. And now I'm going to share again.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
What did I hope? I must fill out your unit.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to share again.
Perfect.
And then what they were talking about earlier, the SSI score is a social selling index score. It's a big term for awareness.
Okay. All right. Here we go. So now you work for Expedia. That's a large organization. So I have no idea what kind of flexibility you're going to have. And this is exactly why we're having this call, right? It's our large companies like that. going to be open to becoming a lot more personal in your profiles or in your content, et cetera, et cetera. But let's just assume that they're like, yeah, go ahead. So here's where I'd start. You got your banner, right? Powering global travel for everyone, everywhere. I think that's a great slogan. I think that's a great tagline. I honestly think that would probably be somewhere in here. That might be a tagline that you look at here. Again, you've got Associate Market Manager for Expedia Group. That's just your title, right? I do HSMI San Diego VP of Programs, but the rest of this stuff, I'm not sure how necessary it really is, right? Because it's less personal. But if I were to do something in your banner, I would have that banner potentially have another picture of you somewhere, and then something that explains exactly what it is you do, how you help people, the results. So powering global travel for everyone everywhere, that's fine. What does that result in, right? What is the tangible outcome, the tangible benefit of this global travel for everyone everywhere, right? That's more along the lines of connecting with people. So again, like I said, I would probably have it be done in a professional way, some sort of graphic designer, whoever. And you can still have all this stuff, by the way. I would have that probably on the bottom. I'd want it to be, again, more personalized. I would likely change the background of this, maybe something slightly darker, because you are front and center here, and I want the banner to be front and center. But the picture's great. You usually want somewhere around neck high. You want to be close enough to the camera, but you don't want to be crazy close and you don't want to be crazy far away. So that's actually a solid picture there. I might just, you could put it in color. Notice that Mercedes is smiling here. That's a very good thing, folks. It means it's inviting. I've seen a lot of people who have this really straight face. And let's face it, do you want to connect with someone who's not smiling? I don't really know, but probably not. Mine's more like a smirk, but at least it's a half smile. So that's what I would do on the top. Now, you don't have a CTA and you don't even have a button. So what you would need to do is create a CTA and a button. So how do you do that? Actually, it doesn't look like you have premium, but let's say you did have premium. I'm not sure you can do a button without premium, but I'm going to show you how. You would basically click on add custom button, and you would add a URL. It would, something would come up so it would look like this. I don't know what just happened there. I have to get rid of that. Let me see if I just did something here. I'll visit my website. Yeah. So basically you would want something along those lines in there. Yeah. So, whoops, sorry. I'm just going to fix this. Okay. So in here, you would click edit, right? And at the very bottom here, you go to edit custom button or add custom button, and you'd be able to put on a URL here. So that would be your CTA. And in that CTA, it would say, book a one-to-one call with me, right? Or schedule your next call or improve your whatever. There's a whole bunch of things you can put in there and you can test them out. You could try different messages, things like that. So let's go back to Mercedes' profile here.
Nate, since we're on premium, what are the biggest benefits besides, of course, a call to action button that you see when utilizing premium?
More reach. You're going to get more reach on your stuff. You're going to get more reach in your content. That's probably the biggest benefit. You've got in-mails also. I use Sales Navigator where you get the most. So that's where we're talking about specific types of membership packages to LinkedIn, but it's mainly the buttons, featured sections, a lot more cool stuff you can put on your profile. I definitely recommend premium for everybody. I think it's $50 a month. And then, so let's go back to her profile. So right now, like I said, she doesn't have a CTA or a custom button. So I would do one of those. And then in your featured, there you go. You've got a newsletter. So is that what you want? You have to remember that. Or I believe that this is a LinkedIn newsletter if I'm going to take a guess here. Yep. It's a LinkedIn newsletter. Again, what you're doing is you're helping LinkedIn, but you're not helping you or your business, right? You're keeping people on LinkedIn's platform. If you had a newsletter on LinkedIn that was like 125,000 subscribers, that's different, right? But chances are very likely not a ton of people are on here. It could be, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But a lot of the power of this platform is getting people off platform. So if your goal is to have a newsletter, that's cool, but you might want to make it an off platform newsletter. But if it were me, I would take the featured, match whatever it is your CTA is, which could be Set it. So let me ask you, Mercedes, what is your goal with a lot of people you're talking to? Is it to get on a call, or what is it typically?
It's interesting because as you can see, I've shifted positions recently. When I was a director of sales and events, I got a lot of events from LinkedIn and a lot of contacts. Now as a market manager, it's more about presence in the market and just being a trusted partner in the market more than anything.
Okay. So if it's awareness, take what I said before, right, to heart, which is if you're not necessarily looking to book appointments, if you're not necessarily looking to have conversations, then you could very well go for the awareness campaign, which is still, we're talking the same message here. You still want to have a really good profile. You still want to have a really good banner. You still want to have a really good tagline. Only now you might want to use the other strategy I mentioned, which is, hey, maybe you want to highlight some good content that you've posted recently instead of necessarily the newsletter. And then lastly, you don't have your about section. It's not on there. So I would definitely put in an about section to highlight who you are, your story, what you do, and talk about some of the benefits. Now, you're a bit of an exception because you are very new to your position. So it's a little bit different than maybe someone else who's been doing something 5-7 years and is looking to book appointments with people, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a really quick profile teardown. I'm happy to look at a lot of other people's profiles as well. Just reach out to me. We can talk about that offline, but that's basically the profile side of it. Anybody have any questions up to this point?
Nothing in the chat right now.
No problem. So let's go to the next piece, which is content. Content is very important here. All right. And if you are not creating content, you are likely not going to be seen. So when it comes to creating content, I go by a very specific formula. All right. I do something called HSSRC. Now, if you're not familiar with posting content on LinkedIn, there's a million different things you can do. You can post videos. You can post selfie plus text. You can post carousels. You can do a million different types, right? Cheat sheets. Those are all big. I recommend starting with something that you are comfortable with, right? I typically do selfies and text. It's just easy for me. And for me, it just tends to work out that way. But let's just go with a particular piece of content that I created the other day. Now, there's also different types of content, right? There's content that educates. There's content that story tells. There's also content that merely entertains or motivates. So the main thing you want to do with your content is, first of all, you want to get people's attention. So remember what I said, HSSRC, hook, story, solution, okay, result, CTA. That's the C, right? The 5 parts of a LinkedIn post. The first thing is the hook. What a hook is supposed to do is draw people in. So you want something like 5 to 7 words to really draw people into the narrative. So what you want to do with a hook is typically elicit some sort of reaction. And that reaction is usually an emotion. Could be anger, could be joy, could be love, could be hate, right? Doesn't matter. The point is you want people to keep reading. But you also don't want to mislead the reader. So you can't just say, my best friend passed away yesterday. Yeah, that's emotionally driven and it's likely going to draw a lot of attention. But if you're not continuing that message and you're not staying on that narrative, then you're going to lose the reader at some point and you're really just doing clickbait and you're not doing anything of substance or of importance. So when you're talking about a hook, when I say I'm not pretending anymore, someone's going to be like, what does that mean? Why? Why is he not pretending? What is he not pretending anymore? And this one happened to be a little bit more personal, but what you typically want to do is talk about the initial hook and then the S is the story, right? So let's say you're in hospitality and you're trying to book appointments. You might want to say, you can go really strong and say, hospitality is dead. Like that's a very powerful hook. You know, what we're talking about here. The normal ways of doing things don't work anymore, right? Instead, we have to do this. But before that, you tell the story. Normally in hospitality, what you've been focusing on is cold calling, showing up, doing webinars, which results in what? The pain, right? Which results in you competing with 12 different companies for the same RFP. And how are you going to differentiate yourself? You've introduced the story, you've introduced the pain. Then what do you introduce? You introduced the solution. The solution is, instead of just doing that, now you can produce content, which is meaningful, educating people, You can build relationships with people. And what does that result in? More meetings, more sales, right? And then if you want to learn this method, drop me a DM. That's your CTA, right? So hook, story, solution, right? Result, more sales usually, right? And then finally CTA, which is your call to action. And that's what I would do. And in terms of cadence, look, you want to post as much as you can. I usually post every day, but you can start off a couple times a week. That's perfectly fine. You start off posting a couple times a week, I think you'll be in really good shape. Most character limits are, I'd say, anywhere between 150 and 200 words is very solid. You don't need to do much more than that. In terms of formatting, you want it to be clean, not a ton of paragraphs, like bulky paragraphs. You typically want to go line by line. That's how people's eyes work on the platform. You got to remember it's visual. This is not article writing. This is copywriting through and through. So it's a different kind of mode of communicating that perhaps some of you are used to, but it's worth learning. It's worth understanding. So you really want short, digestible pieces of content that really leave people thinking and leave people impacted. And in terms of a content mix, like I said, the best mix is one where you can be personal, but also impactful and educational at the same time. So you really want people to understand who you are. It's not just, hey, I'm Mercedes, I work for Expedia. It's, oh, I know Mercedes, she's that one who, right? That's the person who. I'm the person who doesn't cut any corners, doesn't mess around with his speech, and also happens to wear t-shirts every day. Everybody knows me as that person. And while that's a persona, it's also true. So you want to stay true to who you are. And you really want to display that as much as you possibly can. So when it comes to content, I know it's a different place. It's going to stretch your comfort zone, but that's a good thing. All those things you've been thinking about writing and you weren't sure about writing, that's what I want you to write. That's one of the hardest things to do on social media. It's also hard to do when you work for an organization that may or may not approve of it. So I'm not telling you guys to just go against the grain and rebel. You obviously want to have buy-in from the folks that you work with, but you can start stretching the bar a little bit and say, hey, I want to try this out. It's going to start potentially building my book, right? I'm going to start building relationships this way. It's about connecting with people. You're not just wasting your time here. So that's a quick rundown on how I would approach content. And again, I'm always happy to help. Corey's always happy to help. Corey happens to be in my community. He knows a lot of the stuff that I teach and that I do in here. We're not going to learn every single thing today, but I just wanted to give you guys a relatively decent primer. And then the last thing is engagement. Okay. So if you are not engaging with other people on the platform, it's going to be very difficult. And I'm not talking about having to do a million different things. All right. I'm going to give you some quick pointers right now in terms of engagement. So there's a couple of kinds of engagement you need to do. Number one, responding to people who comment on your posts. That's your primary form of engagement. So as you can see, I get quite a bit of comments here. There's 596. It's a lot. I get back to everybody, pretty much every comment. I usually tend to get back to everybody, unless it's 3 days later. As you can see, I haven't replied to these, but for the most part, if you scroll down, you'll see that I have. So typically, this is like how LinkedIn works. There's something called the golden hour. Don't ask. I don't know why. That's what it's called, the golden hour. And typically, how your post is going to perform on the platform is really determined in that first hour. So that's why you need a good hook. People need to see it. And in that first hour, all you really want to do is just monitor what's going on and make sure that you reply to everybody. And you want to try and do it in a timely manner. And if the post picks up a reasonable amount of impressions initially, it has a good chance of performing after that first hour. If it dies, it happens. It dies, right? But part of you growing your account is the second part here, which is engaging with other people. What does that mean? All it means is commenting on other people, okay? And you don't have to do a lot. We're talking to start 10, 15 comments a day. The question is, who do you comment on? That's another big one. Who are you going to comment on? There's a couple of people. You look for people who have a strong presence on LinkedIn. So that would be maybe someone like me, right? You comment on my post, it's going to get a lot of impressions and views to your profile. But does that really help you out? Yes, algorithmically it does. In terms of your business, maybe not, which is why you also want to be commenting on people in your industry who fit your ICP, your ideal client profile. So to find those people, there's a number of different ways. You can just do a search, right? Hospitality, which is going to be ridiculously general. But if you just did a general search on LinkedIn, there, people, I would just click people, and you're just going to see an obscene amount of people, which is not the ideal way to search, but I'm just giving you a very quick and dirty way to find people. But one of the best ways to find people is to see who other people are connected to. So let's look at Kimberly, for example. I'm not sure if your contacts are open. Nope. Doesn't look like that. So your connections aren't open, which is actually interesting. It's Corey's. Let's see if Corey's are. See where it says 500 connections? You're going to see a lot of people like that. Boom. You got people you can connect with, right? You got people you can engage with. And that's how you start. And here's another great way to do it. To find people who are even more interested. Nice logo, Corey. Love it. Dig it. Nice profile. All right. If you go on one of Corey's posts, for example, you could see who's engaging with him. And you could do that in a couple of different ways. Not only can you click on this, which shows everybody who liked it. So you got Nick Horgan in there, Steve Karen, Dan Paradiso, right? You got all these people, but also who's commenting. So you got Nick there, you got Christine. So these aren't always going to be the same. So you got a lot of people to search in there, right? Now, who else should you be connecting with? Who else should you potentially be communicating with? You got another couple of avenues. If you click on My Network and you click on Following and Followers, you can see new people who have followed you every single day. And now I'm getting into something that's a little bit more complex, a little bit more advanced, but this is how I generate business. People who comment on my stuff, people who follow me, people who view my profile, and people who like my stuff. That's usually hundreds of people a day. Now, am I contacting hundreds of people a day? No. I end up getting about 10 or 15 new ones every single day. For a lot of you on this call, that takes a very long time to build up, right? But I just want to sort of preface you with all of that. So if you click on followers each day, you're going to see new followers that have come into your world. So what would you do? You just open them in a new tab. And I always give them a quick glance. I give them a once over. There's Denise. She's an innovation and business consultant. Okay. Is that someone who could potentially fit into my business, into what I do for a living, right? Maybe not. I don't really know. I keep going. She's a CEO. Okay, great. She does freelance. Worked for Hyatt for 25 years. That's pretty cool, right? Not really active on the platform. Posted 10 months ago. But hey, maybe that's a good sign for me to say, hey, Denise, you really should be posting more on this platform. So you have to make that decision on your own, obviously, but it's very quick, right? And what I'm talking about here is being very targeted and very deliberate. So for me, I don't really reach out to people unless they really fit a specific mold for me. And even then, I don't know. Even then, I don't know. I have to reach out to them and start a conversation. The other place where you can see people is you would click profile viewers. And that's even more people. You scroll down a little bit and I can see everybody who's been viewing me. Hey, Alicia. Alicia just checked me out 2 minutes ago. Right? And she's on this call. Steven from NVIDIA just looked at me 1 minute ago, right? And you scroll down. What I'll usually do each day is I'll go back 24 hours. That way I don't lose my place, right? So every day I'll check out 24 hours of data back here. And if I see someone that looks like a potential fit, usually they're second connections because my first ones, I've usually taken care of them, but you never know. It could be someone I haven't talked to in a while. And I will just open them in a new tab, same thing, and see, do I want to reach out to them? Right? And then what do? This is getting way more advanced, but I don't want to get into that necessarily, but I'll give you a brief preview of what I would do. So let's say Evan was someone that I was interested in. CEO, there you go. Hewlett, that's Long Island. Hey, I'm on Long Island. Maybe he's someone to connect with. Usually when I see a blank profile of me, they're not really active on the platform and don't do much. See, 4 months ago was the last post. But the fact that he checked out my profile, he's active enough. So I'll make a decision. Let's say I want to connect with him, or I'll do one of two things. I might connect with that person or try to. And by the way, when you connect, I don't ever add notes unless I really know the person. Statistics say it's pretty much even. Whether you add a note or not, they're either going to accept you or not. What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to look at your profile, and then they'll make the decision whether or not they're going to accept your connection. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about sending a note. But let's say I did want to talk to him. In this case, he's not a first connection, so I'd have to reach out to him in Sales Navigator. And I might have to use one of my credits, or I might not. Let's find out. Free to open profile. Those are the best. You don't have to use your LinkedIn email credits. Sometimes you have to use a credit. So in this case, if Evan reached out to me, if Evan viewed my profile, I write something very simple. Your recent view, right? And this is where it gets a little advanced. I already have scripts for all this stuff. You guys are probably, some of you might have gotten one of my scripts. I have scripts for every single type of connection I have. So in this one, and I'm doing this live. Evan, thanks so much for checking out my profile. I sincerely appreciate it. By the way, I post daily here at 7 a.m. with no fluff, tips, In one of your cases, your message may be very different than that. It could be something like this. Hey, Evan, thanks so much for checking out my profile. I sincerely appreciate it. I always lead with a thank you. Always. But instead of this, by the way, I might say, by the way, I run a private community where professionals like yourself are learning to grow their personal brands and build their businesses. Would love to share some more information with you about it. Is that okay? That's more direct. It's a little bit more salesy, but I have found that those work very well too. If I wanted to go into real sales mode, this in like a Mercedes case, right? This is very much an awareness mode. I want to make you aware of what I'm doing. So I hope that you come into my world every single day, right? And then if Evan takes me up on it and eventually comments on one of my posts, that's a lot warmer, right? So I'm going to hit send and we'll see what happens. He might respond, he might not, but here's my messaging in Sales Nav. And I tend to get responses quite often. So I think I just gave away a little too much information, Kimberly, but because I tend to get carried away, this stuff is very exciting to me. So bottom line is, here's what I want to close with, because I think it's going to help everybody understand like what this new ecosystem, what this way of communicating with people really is. And I'm old school. I'm 46 years old. I'm sure we have varying ages on this call, but I'm going to use a word that isn't used often anymore. Rolodex. Okay. How I look at LinkedIn today, you can look at it in a number of ways. You could look at it as a social media platform where all you care about is vanity metrics. And I want to get 10,000 views per post. And I want to get all the likes and comments and engagement in the world. For everyone on the call here today, right now, I would say, screw that. Okay. That is not what the main purpose of this platform is. This is a virtual Rolodex. It is one of the most valuable places where you can find out things about someone before you contact them. So you don't have to cold call. You don't have to drop something off in their office hoping that they got it and they were touched by your gesture. Okay. Instead, what you can do is put them in a conveyor belt and you can connect with them. And that's your first touch point and say, hey, thanks so much for connecting. I really appreciate it. By the way, I'm posting stuff every single day. Here's what it's about. Would love for you to check it out. Right. And all of a sudden, you're posting consistently. Month goes by, 2 months goes by. You put something that really resonates with them. All of a sudden, you get a DM from somebody. Am I saying it's a magic trick and it works just like that? No, this is hard as hell. It's sales just like anything else, guys. Okay. But it is a different way of doing things. And it is a way to connect in a much easier and quicker way than think about this. You can send out 50 DMs in 50 minutes. Less than that if you have a script, which is what I do. And all of them can be just as impactful. Instead of making 50 calls, instead of making one trip to get in touch with one person, which could waste your whole day or not. Maybe it's a great use of your time. I don't know, but I'm not here to tell you what's a great use of your time or not. What I am here to say is that this is a very good profile for you to build up a very strong presence, connect with people at a personal level, which is going to differentiate you from your competitors. If you're stuck in a room and there's 12 people who all do the same shit, why is that potential client choosing you over the other 11? This is one of those ways, and it's a very effective way of doing that. So I hope you guys learned something today. I know that this is a crazy amount of information to digest. You'll get to see this webinar again as I record it and upload it to YouTube. But I just want to say thanks for everybody, obviously, for listening. I want to thank Kimberly and Corey, and I definitely want to open it up to questions if anybody has any, but I'll do a quick plug here. My company, Brand Built, we help companies and individuals obviously do all this stuff. So whether you wanted to learn it yourself in a smaller setting, like a community, which is someone that, like Corey is a member of our community, or you wanted to have it done for you, we offer that kind of stuff too as well. We do content creation services. We do ghostwriting. So we take people from A to Z. And we also recently acquired a CRM. So if anybody is looking to get a little bit more sophisticated there and track all of their actions and be able to communicate with people automatically, we've got that too. Always feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to connect with me on the platform. Would love to talk to anybody here. But before we do that, I'm going to answer any questions you guys have. And thanks again.
Thank you so much, Nat. There was one question in the chat. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat or just come off mute. But the one question that went in the chat is, would you comment on your network or outside your network? I'm thinking both, but I'll let you go for it.
So what I think you were referring to is first connections, second connections, third connections, right? In the beginning, right? If you don't really have many connections, you got to find them, right? So you might want to actually connect with those people. Now, how the algorithm typically works is if somebody is your first connection, there's more of a likelihood that your content is going to show up in their feed, especially if you've had conversations with them in the DMs, the direct messages, right? So in the beginning, you probably want to do a little bit of a mix. I would say you definitely want to find people, but here's what I would prioritize, right? The people that you want to be engaging with are mostly those who are your ICP, right? Not necessarily colleagues. Don't get me wrong. You want to communicate with your colleagues. But when we're talking about growing your presence and growing your brand on this platform, you want to be engaging with people who are likely potential fits to be your clients or those whose attention you want. Mercedes, I keep going back to you, sorry. But so that's first and foremost. And then other folks who could potentially expand your presence. And so how the algorithm works very briefly is typically your posts will go out to a certain amount of people, right? And usually those people are your first connections and people very close to your network. What will happen is when those people engage, guess who else gets to see it? People in their network, and then people in their network. And that's how the spider web kind of increases. So you're automatically going to be starting out with your initial connections just from your content alone. But in terms of who you should be reaching out to and who you should be engaging with, your select few of regulars, right? Let's say 5, 10 people or whatever that you're always wanting to communicate with. Sometimes I do it I got 10 one day, 10 another day, 10 another day. You don't have to comment on everybody's stuff every single day. It's not that important, but you do want to have some regulars in there and then mix it in, right? Hey, I really like this person's content every day. Don't overthink it. That's one of the hardest things about this platform. You will get sucked in by dopamine and you will get sucked in by impressions and likes and comments. And all of a sudden you'll be miserable in a year. I can promise you that. I've been there. I know people who have been there. If you use it the way it's intended, which again is like a network on steroids, you'll be in really good shape.
Awesome. Okay, so next question is from Victoria. How would you take the same approach to how we manage our HSMAI chapter profiles? Do you have other recommendations for this type of profile?
Interesting. It depends on what your goals are, right? So if your whole goal is to push HSMAI, then you want your profile geared towards HSMAI. And that's a really good question in terms of what is your overall strategy? Because I have a lot of people who are like, okay, let's say in your industry, right? I work for Hyatt Hotels, right? And I want to push Hyatt Hotels brand, but I'm also the chapter head of HSMAI. What do I do? Do I do this one or do I do that one? I meet a lot of people like that. The best piece of advice I could give you is that you want to lead with one thing, but mention the others. So if your primary source of business is pitching and promoting Hyatt Hotels, you're leading with Hyatt Hotels. And then the HSMAI happens to be in your work experience. Maybe it's in that tagline, right? Which we looked at before on Mercedes. That's a perfect example. She talked about what she does there, but also that and it's important because it's in her tagline. It's right up there, right? You could even put that in your banner, proud member of, right? you need to understand what your priority is first. Whatever your priority is in terms of business and promoting yourself, that is what the theme of your profile should be. I hope that helps.
Okay, next question. From Kelsey, aside from hotel sales managers, what other positions do you think would benefit most from using LinkedIn to drive revenue for hotels? Are there other non-traditional roles you think should be using the platform more? Example, concierge, front desk, marketing, who traditionally do not drive leads through LinkedIn.
Okay. My short answer, all of them. And I don't say that, I say that because I'm serious. I'm going to give you a great example, okay? I had someone ask me once, I'm a dog walker. True story. I'm a dog walker. Should I be on LinkedIn? I'm like, do people have dog walkers? Person's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, then you should be on LinkedIn. Even more to the point, here's a better example, right? What if you're in let's say a premium hospitality type business? Let's say you own a restaurant. Should you be on LinkedIn? You're damn right you should be on LinkedIn. Because think about it. What better way to promote it? You have the ability on LinkedIn to search by location. You can search by job title. There's a million different ways you can narrow something down, and you can find 100 people that you need to make aware of your restaurant. Now, as someone who's in concierge, that's a little bit more specific in the sense that, okay, maybe your job isn't to bring leads, but what if you did bring leads? That looks pretty good for you and your job, doesn't it? But what if you're like the concierge? Not just a concierge, you are the concierge at so-and-so property. And Corey and I and Kimberly had a really fun conversation about this. And I remember talking about how, like, we talked about pushing experiences. I remember and I was like, it would be really cool if you posted videos of your events and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that's more appropriate for Instagram and TikTok. But imagine you were that person who was known for doing that. Imagine you were the concierge who had a montage video of you having customer service moments. And you were known as like the concierge at that hotel who provided that amazing experience for that person. That not only looks good for your brand, it looks good for your hotel's brand. And that's what we're talking about. Sorry, Corey, go ahead. I know you were.
And also, guys, I want to underscore the fact that this is also for you personally, right? Just because you're not in sales, building a personal brand and you become that concierge are going to open up a lot of opportunities for you personally, right? So it's not just about driving revenue or sales. And it kind of gets back to what Kelsey was saying. It's the tool to up your game and to be top of mind for what's an opportunity comes your way. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of leaders don't want you on LinkedIn, because they're giving up power. So maybe you can clarify a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So Kelsey just wrote a comment that I thought was really cool. Okay. She wrote, love that. The fill in the blank for any position. Thanks, Nat. Okay. So this is all related. And let's go back to the first thing I said to you guys. Person over the product, right? Person over the product. What does that mean? I would rather be known as the t-shirt guy who doesn't mince words, happens to own a branding company, over co-founder of Brand Built. Very different. So that's what I'm referring to here, is that when you are known as the person who, you've reached another level because everybody knows you as that guy. Like some people don't embrace that. I do. So I'll give you a perfect example. The other day I was at a networking event, and good God, I don't go to networking events very often. And so I was there and I was like, feeling like an idiot. I didn't know. I was feeling very out of place. But one of my buddies arrives and he introduced me to someone and he called me the LinkedIn guy. I thought it was cheesy, but then I was like, you know what? That's the right thing to be calling me at this thing, because I knew more about the platform than anybody at the entire event. And all of a sudden, that's like, you're known as that person. And if every person on this call can be known as a person who does this, you're in phenomenally good shape. Because once again, what's that example I used? The 12 people on that RFP. All of them are concierge, but that 11th or 12th, the concierge who? The one who's always wearing the Grateful Dead shirts. I remember that person showed me a great time, right? Big difference. And that's the kind of difference people are looking for today. That's what gets you into the meetings. That's what gets you the sales. What differentiates you? And that's what a personal brand does. That's specifically what it's for. Yeah.
Can I ask a real quick use case? And I think that's it for the chat. Anybody else have questions? Come off mute or throw them in and I'll keep watching. So if you were brand new LinkedIn user and you're a director of sales at a resort in San Diego on the beach.
Perfect.
You're selling to groups, meeting planners that want to come in and individual travelers. Can you give me an example of 3 posts that you would do immediately as that role?
Sure. Say who the target is again.
You're a director of sales at a beach resort in San Diego, and you're selling the hotel to meeting planners and travel agents.
Perfect. Okay.
Individual travelers.
So what I would do there is very simple. I know my clients. I know my target client, right? You're targeting travel agents and you're targeting people who are planning events, right? So if I know that right off the bat, here's what I would immediately do. Target their pain. Target what do they need, right? So let's say I want you to, and I'm going to throw it back to you. What is one of the biggest challenges that a travel agent faces?
Probably that their guest is going to be taken care of. Everybody come off mute if you have suggestions. But mine, I'm in the tech space, but coming from Hyatt as a travel agent, they just want to know that what they're booking is a safe, fun place where their guest is getting taken care of and the description matches the experience.
Perfect.
That'd be my understanding.
Okay, perfect.
Let me add a little bit. Maybe someone looking for unique and creative team building ideas because okay. Yeah. So add that little spice in there.
Okay. So an example for that would be, you can come at this a number of different ways. And like I said, there's educating, there's entertaining, there's storytelling. There's a bunch of different ways you can come at this. But if a travel agent's biggest fear is that the place that they are presenting to their clients is, let's face it, a dump and has horrible customer service, and what you need to do is talk about those experiences right away in your content, right? And you could talk about either a nightmare story or a concern, right? One of the worst things as a travel agent happened to me the other day, or one of the worst things that I heard a story from a travel agent the other day that'll blow your socks off, right? They made a call, they set somebody up at the hotel, and here's what happened. The reservations got messed up. The lunch wasn't on time, right? It was the wrong room. Key didn't work, blah, 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 all kinds of stuff. And the venue that we were supposed to be booked at, they didn't even know we were coming. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that extreme. On the other hand, when we were working with someone, here's what we did, X, Y, and Z, right? And we worked with this hotel, and here's why. So that really gives you a sense of the power of being able to explain the narrative. And you said 3 posts. Okay, let's talk about 3 different posts. You can do a pain point for each post. You can do a story for each one of those disaster scenarios that happened. One of them could be all about the wrong room. And instead of just saying, oh, wrong room, wrong this, wrong that, you could do the entire piece of content about it wasn't vacuumed, the pillows were crap, the picture was hanging. You can really set the story and, most importantly, visualize it. Make it visual for people. And so your goal on your content is whoever your ICP, whoever your potential client is, you want to tap into the things that they are facing every single day and point them out, and why you are the solution, why your organization is the solution to those problems. And don't just say you're the solution, show them you are the solution. Talk about the stories where the stuff that they're worried about, those worries are assuaged, right? Is that the right word? Assuaged? I tried to sound like big boy. And when you can do, that's when you are connecting with people, right? And that's when you are solving their problems. I don't know, Corey, you looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, actually, I was, and that's that's one of the challenges I see a lot of people in hospitality is, you've mentioned this, that the vanity, the shout outs and the selfies and the empty ballrooms. And it's more of that show mentality. And I think because we're at beautiful properties and we've got the beachfront resort, like Kimberly was setting this up, I think, and as you'd mentioned before, that thought leadership content, like the educating, storytelling, that naturally is not going to get the likes and the impressions and the awareness that a shout out selfie. So they go with the vanity metrics and they leave the thought leadership content alone because it doesn't get the results. And I think that's part of the challenge, is because this industry is obsessed with attribution. They look at the numbers and where the leads came from. And so I think part of that also is, how do you keep, I know you touched on it a little bit, but how do you ignore the vanity metrics and you go 90 days in on thought leadership content? Because that is the ones that's going to drive the sales and leads eventually, but people give up too soon. I don't see maybe there's that few people on my hand in hotel sales on the group. And I know we're talking about on the hotel side. It's literally untapped. There's really no one leading with educational content on that side. And I think it's because they give up.
Let's also talk about LinkedIn as a platform, as any other business. And that's something that people have a hard time grappling with. You can't just post something and become an influencer. It doesn't work that way. You have to develop your presence and your brand. So if you're not in it long term, that's going to be a lot of trouble, and you're not going to make it. And so just like growing your book of business is going to take a long time, so is growing your presence on a LinkedIn. And so that means consistency in posting. And you might be used to writing stuff. I'm happy to announce that's not the stuff that sells. It's just not. Now, is there a time and place for that? Yes. And I'm going to give you an example. Flexes. There's nothing wrong with flexing a little bit on LinkedIn, right? But you want to do it in a way where you're also giving credit to other people.
I'm on a Zoom call, but I don't pick up something. Did you want to go for a ride? Jack in the Box.
Oh, okay. I put that person on mute. All right. So we're not going to Jack in the Box, but we are going to talk about making announcements and doing small flexes, right? So a flex could be, we had such a great turnout last night at the event, right? And you can talk about the specifics of that event and why it went well and how that actually benefited the people that either you're trying to draw in or those that you work with, because that's a great example of, what's that called? It's basically a validating story. It's proof. It's a testimonial, right? So that's different. Instead of being self-serving and saying, I'm happy to announce that, you could say something along the lines of, we just worked with a client that just booked $1 million in revenue in the first quarter. That's different, right? And what you are doing is validating your work while at the same time minorly flexing. Now, in terms of what Corey mentioned, he's talking about reality. And if you guys want a reality hit, here's one. This shit ain't easy. This stuff takes time. It's building a network. It's growing a business, just like any other business. So if you're not committed, and I'm not talking 5 hours a day, but 30 minutes, an hour, you got to put together the content. You got to engage, right? And you've got to make sure that everything is optimized so that when people come and see you, they know exactly what you do, who you are, how you help them. That first part, that's one job, and then you're done. But then everything else is two main things: content, engagement. You should be having conversations every single day with people. And those people need to remember who you are. And then you're basically putting them on what I call a conveyor belt. And how that conveyor belt is designed is that you're going like this: giving, 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 maybe taking, giving, giving, maybe taking, right? And what I mean by that is that's how your content is arranged. So when Corey mentioned thought leadership and educational content, maybe you're educating for 7 days straight. And on the 8th day, you're saying, by the way, we're hosting a webinar in 2 weeks. Here's the link. By the way, we're hosting a webinar in 2 weeks. Comment below interested, and I'll send you the link. These are all CTAs, right? These are all CTAs, calls to action. So again, this is somewhat more, I'm not going to say advanced, but it's somewhat more like for another conversation in terms of the actual process of it all. Again, today was much more of a, hey, let's create our palettes, right? And then we fill everything in. But what Corey's talking about is spot on. Less announcing, more educating, more storytelling, more connecting. That's how you build the relationships. And it's like, how often do you talk to a friend who's, I know a guy who does that. I know a guy. Are you more likely to use that person or someone you just looked up on like Yelp? You're going to use the referral every single time. Every single time you're going to be like, at the least, you're going to call them. At the least. If it's a trusted friend, someone you know, and they're like, I know a guy or I know a girl, she does this, he does that, you're immediately calling that person every single time. And those are the kinds of relationships you can build on LinkedIn. How do you do that? Content engagement, content engagement, content engagement. That's it. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Nat. I think that was it in the chat. If anybody else has questions, last call. All right. Thank you very much for this session. I found it extremely helpful, and it sounds like by the comment section, everybody else did too. So a lot of appreciation. Thank you so much for having the time with HSMAI San Diego. Appreciate you. Corey, do you want to say any closing comments before we all hop off?
Yeah, now I just want to tell you thanks so much, man. Appreciate you jumping on here. Great content. I knew it would. And thanks to everyone for joining us.